Welcome to Healthy Cooking, and today we're going to make a very simple dessert, a slightly healthy dessert compared to the normal desserts that you'll get in restaurants and at the supermarket. So we're going to make it's kind of like a baklava, if you like. It's called apple cherry bundles. I'm going to show you a very easy way to make it, and it's kind of, if you like apple pie or something like that, chances are you'll like this, but it's got a lot less pastry and lots of fruit. So that's the idea, is to show you how to make desserts that don't have empty calories but have a lot of nutritional punch. So this particular recipe that we've got right now is going to use cherries. I've just got used canned cherries. You can get fresh cherries, but canned cherries is okay. We're going to use apple. I normally use a Granny Smith apple. A Granny Smith apple, though, you have to pre-cook it a little bit with a little touch of sugar. This one, so you get a gala, you'll find that if you cut it small enough, you can put it right into your bundles and cook it right off the bat. So this particular recipe is kind of a change from apple pie, if you like, because you get a lot of fat from apple pie. So the pastry alone is about 50% fat, and it's saturated fat. Usually it's got butter or lard or tender flake or something in there which is a saturated fat. We're just going to use what we call a phyllo. The phyllo is pretty inexpensive to buy, and you can make quite a lot of things from it. But because the pastry is so thin, it is a kind of a pastry that does have a little bit of fat in it, but very little, and we're only going to use a small amount of the phyllo. So that's why it's healthy, because we're going to really focus in on the fruit and the ingredients, and this pastry is just to hold those ingredients together. But this is a carbohydrate, and today we are talking about carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are compounds. They're compounds that can be classified into simple or complex carbohydrates. So we're just looking at healthy carbohydrates. The better the carbohydrate that you get into your system, the better it is for you. We've talked previously about fiber. Fiber comes from all these plants and carbohydrates. It's very important in your diet. So let's just take a look at carbohydrates. They're going to give you energy. You definitely need carbohydrates in your diet. The average guy might need 2,500, 3,000, depending on the job, calories per day. So most of those are going to come from carbohydrates. So how can we pick healthy carbohydrates? So if you get a simple carbohydrate, that's just composed of one or two molecules, and it's classed as simple. Whole grains, on the other hand, when you get things like anything that's unprocessed in your cook, it's going to give you a much better workout on your insides, and when you get that better workout on your insides, it's healthier for you. So we're looking at complex carbohydrates, and basically anything that's less processed. Doesn't matter if it's fruit, vegetables, whatever it is, the least processing it is, and that goes for carbohydrates too, the better it is for you. So if you can cook with whole grains, if you can have that long cooking oatmeal as opposed to the instant oatmeal or the 2-minute oatmeal, it's better for you. Less processed, you have to break down the fiber and cook it. So that's why. Stay away from, if you can, something that's processed. Things like cookies, cakes, candies, crackers, pop. We classify those as empty calories. You get lots and lots of calories, but you don't get that nutritional punch that I always talk about. That nutritional punch is so important. So carbohydrates can be found in anything of plant origin. So anything that comes from a plant, things like grains, legumes, vegetables, but they also have things like vitamins, minerals, protein, fiber, and those are important to the diet. So the more of those extra things that you can get in the carbohydrate, the better off you're going to be. So carbs are broken down when you eat them into very, very simple sugars like glucose. So glucose is a sugar, and that gives you the energy. So if you're an athlete and you're running, you have these very simple gels. You just take off the top, take it, and it's almost like a pure glucose that will go into your system very fast. They usually flavor it a little bit, and this will give you instant energy. It gets into your bloodstream very fast. It's the epitome of a simple sugar. Whereas if you look at some of the other ingredients, some of the other carbohydrates that you get, and the compounds and the different breakdown of carbohydrates, you'll see that they've got lots of other things like fiber. Fiber is so important. We've talked about fiber quite a lot, how important it is, and you actually can find there's been studies on indigenous people in different parts of the world, in Africa, indigenous people in South America, and they don't have access to processed foods. They just eat things like roots and vegetables and everything that they can just process in there. I mean, they have game as well, anything that they can shoot, but the main things are nuts, roots, berries, things like that. They all have lots of fiber, and these indigenous people have almost no incidence of colon cancer because everything just keeps going through the system. In Western societies, unfortunately, we have simple carbohydrates, lots of fast foods, lots of foods that don't get digested properly, and that's when we get those incidents of colon cancer. So there are many, many benefits to fiber, but that's just one study that was done recently. There's also another thing called the glycemic index. The glycemic index classifies foods of how fast they release the glucose or the sugar into your bloodstream. And it's a little bit different than the normal kind of complex and simple carbohydrates, but a lot of people on a special diet will follow that glycemic index. It's quite interesting, and for instance, if you're on a high GI foods, it actually releases releases sugar into the blood very, very fast, which means that the body will produce more insulin. And the opposite goes if you're on low GI foods, it releases food slowly. And generally goes with the complex and simple, but there are a lot of exceptions to the rule. So if you're on a special diet, that's important. The glycemic index is a good indication also if you want to stick to a very rigid diet. So let's take a look now at some of this dish that we're going to make. We're going to take just any kind of fruit that you want. You can take some cherries, you can take some apple. Now if you know where the apple came from and you know what it composes of, you can actually just take a small paring knife, cut the core out, and you can put a little bit of apple. Now this is a very easy recipe to make, but the apple in here, we're going to keep the skin on this particular apple if we can, because it's going to break down very fast. We're just going to take the core out. Once we take the core out, get that there, we're going to cut it up into small pieces. The smaller the better for this, because it takes about 8 minutes, 10 minutes to cook in the oven or bake in the oven. And once it bakes in the oven, the apple should be just tender. You should be able to eat it. So we're just going to take a little pieces like this and put them right in with the cherries. Now again, this recipe is inspired from baklava, which is a Greek dish, and it's soaked in a syrup. I'm going to add the syrup at the end if you want to try it with the syrup, because it's actually one of their favorite traditions is soaking it in a syrup at the end, but I recommend just doing the bundles themselves if you just want to get all the goodness of the fruit that's in there. So we've got cherries, we've got apple. We're going to add some nuts. We've got some walnuts, so some walnuts right there, and we're going to add some almonds. Now nuts in general are going to give you vitamin E. Vitamin E is excellent for the skin. This is why they add vitamin E to skin products. This is why they add vitamin E to skin products. So vitamin E, but you're not just going to get that from nuts, you're going to get other things too. You're going to get a boost to the immune system. You're going to find that it's good protection against cancer, cardiovascular disease, things like that. But it's also got the omega-3 and the omega-6 fatty acids. We've talked about the benefits of omega-3 in your diet. So you're going to find a great punch from nuts. We don't have enough nuts in our diet, and again fiber, you're going to get that fiber in there too. We're going to add some dried fruit. You can add any dried fruit, could be cranberries, raisins, sultanas, anything like that. I've got a few raisins that I'm going to add into this, and raisins also are going to give you a little bit of fiber. It's a great antioxidant. It's going to help your blood flow. So all these things in here, you've got a good nutritional punch. So although you're getting a dessert and you feel like you're getting something nice and sweet at the end, you do have a good nutritional punch in there. I am going to, now you could also, if you don't have any fresh fruit, just add some dried fruit. You could add a little bit of berry blend. If you take a look at the different frozen berries that come, you could add blueberries if you want. If you've got fresh blueberries, just add a little berries in if you want, but you don't have to. You could just do this simple with apple and nuts. It could be as simple as that. I've got a few cherries in, a little bit of fruit in there. Nuts are excellent. I'm going to add a little touch of clove just to season it. This way we don't have to add too much sugar, and cinnamon. Cinnamon is excellent with apple. Whenever you have an apple, have a little bit of cinnamon. You're going to toss that around, and you're going to see that this filling is a little bit wet. So what we're going to do is just add some whole grain panko breadcrumbs, and this, when it cooks, especially with the frozen fruit, is going to suck up all that juice so that your bundles don't go flat on you into the oven. Okay, so we just toss that around. No added sugar, and then we're going to use phyllo. So that's the filling to kind of your apple pie, if you like, but you can use anything. You can just use apple and cinnamon if you want, if that's all you've got, but you will need some phyllo. Now phyllo is a little bit tricky to work with. If you've never worked with it before, you have to either work really fast, or you put the phyllo out, put a little bit of saran wrap and a little bit of a damp cloth over, so you've got a little bit of time to work with it. But if you're very fast, you don't have to do that. You can actually just work with it. Usually you'll find it in the frozen section. Take it out the day before, and you'll find that your phyllo should be very moist when you take it out. If it's been in the freezer a long time at the supermarket, it'll all break apart. You'll find it very frustrating to work with. But I'm just going to take this. So this is a super thin pastry, and all I'm going to do is unroll the phyllo out, and we're going to take the layers of phyllo. I'll just put them onto my cutting board here, nice and dry. Take the cutting board, so we take the phyllo like this. So I can show you the classical way to make this if you want. Bigger than the board. Yep. I'll show you the classical way to make baklava, and then I can show you a very easy method. If you want to just make this quickly, make it a little bit, make your little bundles a little funky, you can do that. So you put your first sheet down. We're going to take a little touch of beaten egg white, and we're just going to brush the phyllo with beaten egg white. Beaten egg white doesn't have cholesterol, so a little bit healthier than using just beaten egg, if you like. We're going to take another piece, go right on top of the phyllo. Okay, doesn't have to be exact. Again, little bit of egg white, and then your last piece goes on top of this. So you take your last piece, and you'll see that phyllo, if you just let it sit there for a long time, it will dry out on you. The corners will dry out, gets hard to work with. But if you can work at a nice steady pace, you should be pretty good not to have to cover it. Once you've got the phyllo out there, all we basically do, if you want to do it the classical way, the the Greek way if you like. We're just going to take a little touch of your fruit. Actually, you can actually cut it into 4 big strips because we're going to cut it in half, and then we're going to cut it in half again, and then in half again. So you just put it in the very corner, apple, fruit, whatever you want to put in there. Okay. And we're just going to fold it over. So you fold it over until you get to your corner. Once you fold it over into a triangle, just put that over there, then you can just fold it over once, twice, and just keep following the triangle, and actually then you get these little bundles like this. So very easy to do. Same thing with the smaller ones. If you want to make them a little bit smaller, you can fold them over and then make little bundles. Okay, so you can make them into little triangles. You'll see if you go to and do a classical spanakopita, which is with spinach and feta, this is the way it's done. They make them usually a little bit smaller for appetizers, but quite easy to make. Just fold it over and you can actually put these right into the oven and they'll bake. But then when you serve them and the brown, you can actually put 2 together, put them up, get a little height to the dish. They're quite nice presentation if you do it like that. And I'll just show you the last one, and then I'll show you a very simple way to do it, just so you can see it and say, well, that's the way I'm going to do it. This one is just a neat tidy. Put it into a triangle, over it goes, and these then will just go right onto a baking sheet. So you take a baking sheet right here, you can pop your big spanakopita, they're not spanakopita, they're cherry bundles, but they look like that, right onto the tray. But then if you want, you can make a very simple one, and the simple one to make this method is, again, it's off a nice clear area. Take your phyllo, put the phyllo down. Okay, same thing again, egg white. And now if you were making it traditionally, you would use melted butter, but obviously butter has saturated fat. We're trying to reduce the saturated fat, so we're just going to use a little bit of egg white. Same here, take this one and put it right on top. If you get it first time, it's a lot easier with egg white. You won't be able to shuffle it around too much. And just put the egg white right over. This is going to seal it, but it's also going to give you a little bit of layers to the dish as well. So it's got a little crispiness to it, but it's so thin that you're not going to get anywhere near the amount of fat or saturated fat that you would with a pie dough. So now you've got this large area, just cut it into 4. So we cut the other one into 4, we're going to cut this into 4. We're going to take our filling, and you can just take your filling and now put it right into the middle of the 4. And this is the easy method. Put the filling in. We may just have enough for 3 right here filling. I can make a little bit more after, because you want to make sure you get a little bit of these bundles. Now what I usually do then is take a little bit of this egg white, push it around the outside just to make sure that we can bring it up and seal it. Okay, and then you can actually bring the whole thing up together and just scrunch it together into a bundle. And that's the easiest way. You don't have to mess around doing the nice folds. If you find it difficult to make the folds, just scrunch it up. And this kind of has a bit of a wacky look to it anyway when it's cooked. Looks nice on the plate as well. So the classical way of making the bundles, but also the kind of scrunchy way of making the bundles too. And then what I usually do is just quickly go over with a little touch of egg white. The egg white does have protein, so you're going to find it browns, gives you that nice kind of golden brown look. Okay, and here, just on the bundles, and I like the bundles to look a little wacky as well, so you can actually pull them open and just let them go loose at the top, because they look kind of nice when they're finished. You pop these in, and generally speaking, about 8 to 10 minutes is all you need to bake these for, and you should just bake them until they're golden brown. And if you're using Golden Delicious or a very water-based apple, they'll cook very fast if you cut the apples small. Now if you want to use Granny Smiths are the best apples to use, but you should pre-cook Granny Smiths a little bit. They won't break down in that amount of time. And they tend to be tart. If you want a little sweetness, this apple will give the sweetness. With Granny Smiths, will hold, the texture will be better, but they won't be quite as sweet. I'm going to pop these in the oven for about 10 minutes, and I'll see you in a few minutes from now. And really, there you have it. Very simple to make. We brown them. These are the kind of the traditional way of doing the bundles. And this is the just the easy way of doing the bundles. You make them look a little bit wacky. There are simple methods now of kind of making this a more traditional dish. There's a little simple syrup that you can pot, and you let these soak in the simple syrup. I don't recommend doing that, but I'm going to include that in the recipe. The benefits of not doing that is that the pastry is super thin on this, so really what you're doing is you're eating the fruits, the nuts, whatever you put in there. So I recommend fresh fruit like apples. You can even use pears. You can use cherries, which are good. You can use frozen fruit. Remember, if you use anything frozen or anything really wet, just to add a little bit of panko crumbs in. That way it stays nice and firm. And you can just serve these as a little pastry. If you took a little plate, put them on like that. I mean, obviously you can serve them with a little bit of ice cream or something like that, but you know, just like that, having the fruit in the pastry is actually a nice dessert to have after dinner. And the bundles are quite simple too. You just make them a little wacky, pull everything together. You can fill them right up, and then you've got yourself a dessert right there. Very easy to make. Remember that there's lots of benefits to fresh fruit, to nuts, to dried fruits. It doesn't have to be dried raisins like I've got in here. You could have dried apricots, cranberries, anything that you want in there. Apricots is wonderful. Just chop them up and put them right in. I'll see you again next week on Healthy Cooking.